What's up, everybody? Hey, according to my birth certificate, my name is A. Brandon. Our Brandon, it's got an A in front of it. And, this video is for my wife, my family, all the videos I made, you should know that I'm about marriage, So, um, I did some Bible study videos because I believe in God, God first, of course, I don't know what God means to other people, whether they call it the Lord or whether they call it God or whether they use those different names and stuff like that. But, I was told that God is not a book. And the way it was explained to me, they was like, if God has not told you that any of those names are the name of anyone, whether you said it was a son or a daughter or a family or anyone, then you don't have any evidence that God ever told you that any of those names are the name. Whether you said it was the name of God or the name of a son of God or the name of a daughter of God. If God has not told you, then you do not have evidence. A person can tell you that God told them this or God told them that. But if God has not told you, how do you know if that person is telling you a lie? They are not God, So when I read those books, it says God is not a book. Stuff be in the book and it be true. Stuff be in the book and it be a lie, Stuff be in the book and it be crazy, They say that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. And he says, in the beginning, God. It's crazy because according to the book of Genesis, Moses didn't even exist at the time. They said that Moses was born after Adam and Eve, had children and all of that. So how could Moses bear witness to what was happening in the beginning if he wasn't there? It's like he would be bearing false witness if he, was saying in the beginning. Where did he get his information from? Because when you read the book of Genesis, I never read the part where Moses said, oh, it's just hearsay. Because since he wasn't actually there in the beginning, he's just saying what somebody else told him. Like how when I talk, when I said I was told or when someone else told me. So I'm not actually saying that, I was there in the beginning and saw it all be created, So it's little crazy stuff like that. And it was like, and when they say, well, what about the New Testament? People say that when they said Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights being tempted by the devil, well, if Matthew wasn't there and Mark wasn't there and Luke wasn't there and John wasn't there, it's like they bearing false witness when they say and they write that stuff in the books. How would they know what Jesus was doing if he was there alone and none of them were there? Who told them that? Who told them that Jesus was in the wilderness alone? Because if he was in the wilderness alone being tempted by the devil and no one witnessed it, how would someone be able to write a story about it if they wasn't there? So, it's stuff like that. It's just crazy when you read the book. And that's why I say that God is not the book, Because did God ever tell you about the name Jesus? Did God ever tell you about a letter J or a letter Y? Did God ever tell you that? If a pastor said God told him something, but God didn't tell you the same thing, how do you know if he's telling a lie or not? One thing you do know, God never told you any of that stuff. And which God told him any of that stuff, you know. It's crazy. You understand what I'm saying? So, you know, you have to think about those types of situations the way it was explained to me when you read the Bible. When they said in the beginning, God, in Genesis 1, first book of the Bible, you know, they said Moses wrote the first 5 books. How did Moses write about him being born and Adam and Eve being made if Moses didn't exist? And when Moses died, how did Moses write about him dying if he was dead? You know, when you read about the death of Moses in the first 5 books of the Bible, how would Moses still be writing about his own death, you know, if he was dead? Some don't really make sense about this stuff. So it was like, you know, is the Bible a book or a collection of books, you know, like the first 5 books of Moses? Those books are not God, you know. The same way a person can say God told him this and God told him that. Are you sure God actually told them any of that stuff? Who do you believe? Do you believe what people say God told him and what they wrote in the book? Or do you actually believe in God, you know? Did God ever say he had a name? Did God ever say it was just he? Did God ever say which gender or a gender? It's a difference between what a book say and what a person write in a book and what a person says that God says, or what a person writes in a book that God says and what actually God says, you know. Do you believe in God or do you believe in what a book says about God? Do you believe in God or do you believe what people told you about God? Do you believe in God or do you believe in pictures and videos and statues and books and art and what people say about God? You know, stuff like that. Different preachers and pastors and people that claim that they're geniuses and smart, they argue on the internet and they swear by different names. People claim that they know God and that they know for a fact the name of God and the name of a Christ or a son. They even claim they know what color a person was. When people say stuff like that, are they bearing false witness when they say that stuff? Because they are claiming that they actually met God in order to know the name. They are claiming that they actually met Christ in order to know the name. Did Christ tell you a name? Did God tell you a name? Or is it just something that you made up or that you read in a book or that you think, you know? That's why I always say I was told or I think or I feel or I am a witness of what I was told or what I think or what I saw or what I hear, you know. They said that, you know, some people argue you up and down and want to argue and say they know for a fact what the name. And he's like, so did God tell you a name? Did Christ tell you a name? Then where did you get your information from? Another man, a book, a person, you know, something that is not God. You know, God is not a man. God is not a book. God is not a statue. God is not drawings or paintings or pictures on pyramids and in artwork. So, you know, people can say they think this picture or this statue or this art or this book or this letter or these words mean that or this. But none of it's God. It's just what they think, you know. Unless you can say for a fact God told you it's not God. Unless you can say for a fact Christ told you it's not Christ. What if all of those names are the name of a demon and a devil, and when you call upon those names, you're demonically possessing yourself because you don't have any evidence if God has not told you those are the names. You know, something to think about, you know. So I'm not sure, and I'm not suicidal because I don't want to be like those other people saying it's definitely spelled with a Y. It's definitely spelled with a J. It's definitely the real name, you know. I wouldn't want to, you know, be the person that told somebody wrong, you know. So I always said, I'm not sure, you know. Ask God if you have any questions. Don't follow me, follow God. I'm just some crazy person. I'm a mental health patient, you know. I'm not suicidal, you know, stuff like that, you know. So, you know, it's not, you know, just about the Bible or Christians or stuff like that. Any book, whether it's the Quran or any of it, you know. Did God tell you his name is Allah? The same way did God tell you he had a son? You know, when Islam said God has no son, well then, do you have any evidence? Did God tell you he has a son? Did God tell you he's a he? Did God say a son of God exists, or did a book say that? Who wrote those books? Can you bear witness of who wrote those books? I believe in God. I'm not trying to make anybody get a divorce. I'm not trying to make anybody separate, you know. People who want to be together, I'm not trying to make them get a divorce. People who want to be together, I'm not trying to make them separate. You know, stuff like that. I'm going to say it again. People who want to be together, I'm not trying to make them get a divorce. People who want to be together, I'm not trying to make them separate. I'm not trying to cause any separation with anyone, and I'm not trying to cause any divorce with anyone. You know, it's not my business. You know, if a person want to separate or divorce, you know, stuff like that, you know, I'm not trying to make anyone separate or divorce from anyone, you know. And I'm not a pastor, I'm not a preacher, I'm not a relationship coach or advice, none of this stuff like that. So, you know, like I was saying, the same way you don't have any evidence of a name of God telling you or a name of a son, has God ever told you about the son? Well, it's the same thing when you look at the Quran. Do you have any evidence when you open the Quran? Did God ever tell you a name of Allah? If God never told you the name, then it's just a name that somebody else told you. And when you trust in a name that somebody else told you, you're not believing in God. You're believing in a name somebody else told you. Or you're believing in a name that somebody wrote in a book. Or you're believing in a name that you saw on a statue or on a pyramid somewhere. And none of those items are God. God is not those items, and God is not a book, whether it's the Quran or the Bible. And the Bible is a collection of books, you know, the books of the Bible. So the Bible is not even a book. It's a collection of books, the way it was explained to me. So I'm not sure. It's just what I was told. Because I don't want to be like those other guys saying, I know, you know. I'm not sure, you know. I'm just some stupid person that got beat up and stuff like that, you know. So, you know, God is not a book. The Quran is not God. The Bible is not God. I believe in God. I love God. So, you know, and if they say that God means something bad to them or God is a bad word or they say stuff like that, well, it's just what they say. I'm not talking about the same God they're talking about when they're talking about this word means this and that word means that. It's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about God. You have to ask me, what do I mean or what am I talking about? Because they might be talking about something bad, but it's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about God, you know. The Bible can be an idol, and the Quran can be an idol if you try to make the book into your God. If you say the book say this and the book say that, and it's about what the book say, since the book is not God, it's supposed to be about what God says. Because you don't know who put that stuff in them books. If you weren't there when they wrote them books and they made them books, you would be bearing false witness if you tried to say that you know for a fact who